Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, book boys and book girls. Book everyone.
Book everyone. We're back, not with Friedrich Nietzsche, but with a Christmas special.
Yes.
And isn't that wonderful?
It is wonderful. We've chosen the ultimate Christmas novel, I guess, the ultimate Christmas short story, which is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens.
Yeah, I think anyone has at least heard of it, probably seen some kind of Disney version as a child.
Anyone who's heard of Christmas.
Like, even...
They've heard of carols.
Yeah, even like people in Japan know this shit, you know?
Yeah. Yes, it's pretty ubiquitous. So it was written in 1843. It's nice and old. Is this maybe like the oldest book we've read?
So far,
pretty fucking old.
Yeah.
By Charles Dickens, who himself was born in 1812, which is over 200 years ago. And I was surprised they still play like the yes and no question game. You know, the one where they're like, is it human? Yes. Is it like a female? No. Is it like, are they alive? No. You know that like 20 questions game.
What?
Did you read the book?
What are you talking about right now?
They played. Never mind. Doesn't matter. We'll get to it later.
Okay.
So let's talk about the story. What happens?
Yeah. I guess we'll just briefly summarize it. I mean, anyone knows it, but okay. So there's 5 chapters basically. First one is the exposition where we learn about this very stingy character called Ebenezer Scrooge, who,
They basically made the word miserly to describe him.
Mm-hmm.
Miserly is the word.
He's very rich and he has basically no friends. He has a nephew that's his only family, but he's not really, friendly towards him, and he's not really friendly towards anyone. And of course, the setting here it's Christmas, or it's the days before Christmas, and people are wishing him Merry Christmas, and he's just going around like, "Oh, humbug Christmas! What is this nonsense?"
Yeah. Also, this is the 7th anniversary of his business partner, Jacob Marley's death.
Yes.
Which becomes relevant in the 2nd chapter, where he gets visited by the ghost of this guy, this Jacob Marley character basically tells Ebenezer Scrooge that he will be visited by 3 spirits in the coming days, and those 3 spirits make up the following 3 chapters. The first is the Ghost of Christmas Past, which shows Scrooge his where he came from, and it shows 3 kind of scenes in his life where he either reflects on positively or kind of sees as a turning point where he kind of decided to choose money over things like love and other like positive things in life. The second is the Ghost of a Christmas Present, who shows the world today that Scrooge is missing out on, I think, by being so not down with it, and showing how people are celebrating in spite of not having money and stuff like that. And then the third is the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, which shows Ebenezer Scrooge his death basically, and basically the lack of impact that his legacy has. And then the final chapter is where he basically acts on this experience and becomes a better person for it.
Yes.
And decides to change his ways, decides to become more generous, decides to connect with his family and the people around him, and it's kind of like a bit of an epiphany moment.
And it saves him from death as well.
It does, yes, that's right. So that's the story. What did you think of it?
I liked it, like, overall. I think it's a great story. It's obviously hugely influential.
Yeah.
I mean, just the word or the name Scrooge has taken kind of a life on its own. There's a bunch of Hollywood movies coming out about it that are like vaguely related to it. I think there's one starring, Bill Murray called Scrooged. It's like a classic
right.
Christmas movie, but
Sure.
yeah, I mean, I think this is part of kind of a literary canon for a reason, and we can debate about whether it's like greatly written from a literary perspective, but I guess the central message it hits upon is quite universal, and it's one that it really drives home a moral without super overly being overbearing on the aspect of Christmas or Christianity.
That's true. Yeah.
Like anyone can read this book and get something from it, and you certainly don't have to be Christian. And I guess the whole idea of these kind of spirits appearing as well, it's not exactly very Christian.
No, it's not. And there is I remember reading a section which does actually kind of criticize Christianity. Scrooge addresses one of the spirits, and he kind of mistakes the spirits for a Christian.
Yeah. This is the present.
Yeah. And it's kind of the suggestion is that the spirit might be connected to Christianity, but it's people who have interpreted the Bible and things that have kind of what's the word, strayed away from this real meaning of it. I guess.
Yeah. I think
experiential meaning.
I think Scrooge basically makes an offhand comment to the spirit about oh, but look at what your family is doing, all these terrible things, alluding to the church, I guess. And the ghost of Christmas present is whoa there, don't mistake myself, that being kind of the ghost of Christmas, for what certain followers of who proclaim to be acting in my interest are doing, right? I don't know, it could be an institutional critique on the church. It doesn't really have to be a critique of Christianity per se, but
that's what I think it mainly was.
And I mean there's obviously a whole other component here of and this is kind of more staying maybe within the general scope that this podcast has been taken so far, is kind of we can talk about existentialism and what it means to how to lead a meaningful life. And I guess also a lot of people reading this book are discussing on kind of capitalism and that kind of philosophy as well. There's a lot to pick up here.
I mean, personally for me, I thought that it was an enjoyable book, and bearing in mind this book has there were considerations made when writing this book. This is a book that you can read in front of the fireplace at Christmas to your family of 15 children, whilst your barefoot trad wife is making fucking chicken or something. Back in the 1900s or something. This this book clearly is, I know it's also supposed to be widely distributed as well. I feel there's nothing about the style of this book, the length and the structure. There's nothing about this book which suggests that it's trying to be inaccessible. Right? Yeah. It's very very easy to digest.
And I really did enjoy the writing style. I thought the language was very witty.
It was. I listened to an audiobook for some sections of it as well, and it translated really really well to to being spoken. You could tell that it was. I think that was also a consideration, making it readable.
I was also doing half reading, half audiobook. It was quite enjoyable. And what is that? That first, I showed you this a while ago. The first section where it talks about
Marley being dead.
Yeah. Can you read that little
passage?
I thought it was just really linguistically clever, and
usually
if authors do this kind of if they dwell on a linguistics point for no apparent reason to the story, I usually find it annoying. Can we just move the fuck on? But I thought it was really great way to open the novel and kind of set the tone that even though we're discussing a serious topic, this is kind of a jolly, witty story,
Yeah, and just to add on that before I read this passage, the author as well, or like the narrator, because there is kind of like a narrator speaking here, or like a third person speaking.
Yeah.
Like they don't care about. It's really not designed to like create suspense or create fear, create particular like strong reactions. And we can talk a little bit about that later, but I'll read this passage. This is literally like the first 2 or 3 paragraphs of stave 1. Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Mind, I don't mean to say that I know of my own knowledge what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade. But the wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile, and my unhallowed hand shall not disturb it, or the country is done for. You will therefore permit me to repeat emphatically that Marley was as dead as a doornail.
I love this so much.
It's very funny.
Like usually, if we have this kind of, I don't know what you call it, simile or whatever, like as dead as a doornail, the phrase, right? And then he takes it apart and it's kind of like, isn't it funny how you say dead as a doornail, even a doornail isn't like even dead, Like usually this is annoying, right? If someone is like, actually a doornail isn't alive, so it really makes no sense to say as dead as a doornail. But he does it in a way that's so, like really, immediately puts kind of a smile on your face while reading the first chapter. You're like, all right, I can read this,
For sure.
I like the I'm not gonna put my hands on like the history of the English language and so on, or the country's done for.
yeah. It's like it's kind of a melodramatic in a way.
Yeah.
Like it's self-indulgent, but it's it's quite a good way of starting the story.
It's funny, and he does not how to put this. The narrator is not kind of the objective, omniscient narrator. He's omniscient, but he's not like objective in the way that he like tries to relay the story as like a completely unrelated third party. He doesn't like have kind of opinionated issuance here and there, but not enough so that it would interject with kind of the way that the audience takes the story.
Sure.
It feels like the narrator is basically like Dickens as like a grandpa coming like, gather around the fireplace. I will now tell you this story. And
exactly.
Every now he like stops while reading the book. He like stops and is like, says some funny comment and then it just goes on.
Yeah. So there's another section where we meet the Marley's ghost for the first time, and there's a similar kind of like the narrator comes and like fits in their own like basically dampens the shock of seeing this ghost. And like I thought it was quite clever how it was done. I will read this out. So he's leaving to go home after finishing work, and he arrives at the threshold of his door and looks at the knocker, the door knocker. It says here, now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door, except that it was very large. It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it night and morning during his whole residence in that place. Also, that Scrooge had as little of what is called fancy about him as any man in the city of London, even including, which is a bold word, the corporation, alderman in livery. Let it also be borne in mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought on Marley since his last mention of his 7 years dead partner that afternoon. And then let any man explain to me, if he can, how it happened that Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, without its undergoing any immediate process of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face. And then it kind of continues. And like I don't know, there's something about like the way that this paragraph develops is not in a way. It's not designed to create tension. It's designed to surprise, but like, I don't know. Yeah, it's the way that it approaches you as information doesn't lead you into like any feeling, any bad feeling. I guess it's like the most rudimentary way of describing it.
Yeah, and then also how they pick up the whole door knocker thing again in the last chapter. Do you know what I'm referring to?
No.
So, I thought this was so great. So so we have this whole little dialogue about this knocker looking. It was just a regular knocker, you know.
Yeah.
But then after Scrooge is reformed and he's all like, "Oh, Merry Christmas, I'm so happy." In the last chapter, there's a passage where he sees the knocker and he's like, "Oh, what a wonderful knocker this is! I can't believe it. It's so like, you know, it feels like, you know, in musicals you have like a certain tune, and at the start of the musical it'll maybe be like dramatic,
like a motif.
But then they reform the same song, but it's like more jolly or whatever.
For sure.
It very much has that kind of energy.
So I want to talk about things that annoyed me, and to be honest, like quite a lot of stuff annoyed me about this book, more so than I thought.
Yeah.
It is difficult, like approaching a book like this, which is obviously so influential, and obviously not like not really meant to be super strongly dissected, but I still feel like there are some kind of important things to raise.
Go on.
Firstly, I think the general, like, I have a problem with the fact that Scrooge's trigger for his change is like basically rooted in not wanting to be forgotten, and like it's like very strongly socially situated.
Yeah. Okay. I see. Okay.
And it's not. Yeah, I think there's a strong argument that like his change is based more on a fear of not being seen as a good person, and not receiving the social like respect for being seen like that.
I was thinking about this as well, and it especially comes through in the second to last chapter of the future, where he sees the future and he sees how, you know, no one will care if he dies and so on. And I was also thinking like, oh, so his reforming, like him reforming is a completely like egotistical kind of motive. But in retrospect, I kind of disagree, because it also struck me how in the second chapter, The Ghost of Christmas Past.
Ghost of Christmas, second chapter.
Yeah. Sure. I was very, and this is actually my critique, I was very surprised how immediately Scrooge comes to regret. And here, and this is, so basically, okay, in the first chapter, Marley, his old partner, told him that the thing that is so terrible, like after death, you know, if you've not been a good person, the thing that will haunt you the most, the thing that will keep you literally, like, he's in chains. He's a ghost with chains.
He's chained by all these things relevant to his job as well, right? Like bank books and registers and stuff like that, all like literally attached to his body as chains. Yeah,
but the thing that is like his regret, the reason why he is the way he is because he regrets not being able to do more for the people he cared about, or he should have cared about more. And in the second chapter, Scrooge experiences this very thing where, you know, in the first chapter there's like a boy knocking on his door and singing like a Christmas carol or something, and he is just like, oh, go away, you know, I don't care. But then he, in the second chapter, he kind of sees his childhood, and he sees how like people have been good to him when he was a child, like his former employer and shit. And he like regrets, oh, I wish I was nicer to that boy, you know, I wish. And that's where his transformation starts. Him, and I think that's kind of the core. Him regretting not to be able to do more for the people he cares about. And yeah, okay, so this is one motif, and then conflicting with that is, in the future, it seems more like his reforming himself is purely based on the fact that he wants to be seen as a good person, which is contradicting to what the transformation he went through in the past. And I think the way it's meant to be understood is, and Scrooge says this multiple times, is, "Oh, I shall embody the Christmas past, present, and future." Sure. So yes, it is partially egotistical, but I don't think that's really at the core of his transformation.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I was also kind of surprised. The next thing I was going to bring up was that, like, how quick his transformation was.
Yeah, I thought
maybe that's like a critique of the writing more than anything.
Yeah.
And maybe the constraints of it being such a short story, but like he doesn't. I don't trust him as a character. Like I don't feel like I can trust how he's being sold. Like in the beginning chapter, he's like, painted as this, like miserly guy. Like he's just completely miserable, doesn't like anyone, impenetrable, like horrible person. And but it takes such a pretty small, although supernatural, but relatively small like experience
time wise. It only takes like a couple of minutes, right?
For him to completely, for this whole thing to just completely evaporate.
Yeah. It is somewhat gradual, I will say. So,
but it also, I'm also skeptical as to why do we need the ghost of the Christmas yet to come, right? Like what does that serve?
Yeah, it doesn't. It does not make the point of wanting to give back to the community stronger. Because we have this kind of thing of like, oh, it's only about you, right?
Yeah.
It makes for like a beautiful, like,
it's
a triforce of past, present, and future.
For sure, yeah.
It doesn't super add to. It doesn't really connect back to the reason why Marty showed up in the first place. Of like, you will have regrets about not helping people, right?
Yeah.
Although we also see, this is a kind of a big point. So his clerk, Bob, has a son called Tiny Tim.
Tiny Tim.
Tiny Tim is very sick and very ill, and Scrooge didn't know about this, but he sees kind of him suffering and how the family is struggling to kind of keep him alive, and he learns this is the present, and he learns that if Tiny Tim doesn't get basically like medical attention or whatever, Tiny Tim will die.
Yeah.
Basically,
he sees that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's also like he does. That's part of his transformation in the future, I think, as well.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah. Yeah. Nice. That's well explained. What else did I have to say? There was another kind of like issue I guess I had. This is not a super strong issue, I suppose, but like this like with the ghost of the Christmas present, when we get this view of all these various households having celebrations and stuff. There's like slight emphasis on like look at these people, they have virtually nothing, but they're having such a joyous time without like, even though they are their circumstances aren't very good.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of the Titanic. Have you seen that movie?
That's different from the Japanese crab boat. Yeah, I've seen the movie.
So in that movie, there's like a scene where Rose goes to the bottom of the ship where the like lower class, like the working class, like third class passengers are, and there's this, this contrast between the stiff upper lip, like high class restaurant area and whatever, everyone having their like a very very guarded, and then the bowels of the ship where all these like working class like immigrants and people from everywhere are like dancing on the tables and like drinking beer and stuff and being all like jolly and jovial and whatever. And like it always struck me as kind of like weirdly like unnecessarily romantic, I guess, or like trying to draw this contrast between like, people who have money are like stuck up and whatever, which might be the case, but that not having money necessarily means that you're like this salt of the earth, like what's really important to you and stuff like that. There's a similar kind of like parallel being drawn in this book, I think, of like, which I don't really know, like I just have a kind of problem with it, I guess.
I like the point you're making, but I would also refute it. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're getting at is it almost, excuse me for using the bad N word, it almost makes a kind of Marxist fallacy.
I thought you said N word then. It's like the bad N word.
The ghost of Christmas. No. No, the bad M word.
Yeah.
It almost makes a Marxist fallacy of by virtue of being poor, you are virtuous.
Right.
And if you're rich, then you're by nature you're bad. And basically, we need to invert the hierarchy and so on. I think so. I do see in the Titanic scene, it does kind of have that feeling. I would say in this book, the difference is, first of all, we're in like the first half of the 18th century. We just saw kind of beginnings of Industrial Revolution, and most people are really poor. Like there isn't really that much of like working class, middle class, upper class divide as nowadays. It's more like everyone's pretty poor, and then there's like a few guys who are kind of rich. But the big point I think is all the people that we see being pleasant or being virtuous and being nice about Christmas, it's the nephew, Scrooge's nephew, who isn't particularly wealthy, but they have like a housemaid and shit, right? So they're not not terribly poor. I would say they're kind of middle class, perhaps. And then there's like the family of the clerk, who certainly don't have money.
Yeah, they are described as poor. Like they're just described as knowing the inside of a pawn shop, right?
But and one of the big examples for someone who's really good and kind of stark contrast to Scrooge is in the Christmas Past. We see his former employer when Scrooge was an apprentice, and his former employer was
yes,
he was kind of well off, but he was very generous. He he arranged music and food for everyone on Christmas, and he gave his employees like time off and so on. And that's one thing. But then in the Christmas future, we go into the like low class part of town, and it's described as really filthy, ridden with crime. And we see kind of the like washing maid and the undertaker and whatever.
Yeah.
And so we see kind of how Scrooge will die if he doesn't change his course. And they're really just like, they're like worse than Scrooge in the story, kind of, they like steal shit from his corpse, and like when they're taking the corpse out of his house, they like steal his curtains, and they like talk shit on him constantly while they're like looking at his dead body. And it's like really kind of the like the darkest scene, I would say, probably in this story. And
you almost don't realize what's happening because of how kind of humorous the whole book is.
How humorous the language is. But so I would say yes, a lot of the middle class people are kind of described as being poor but virtuous. But it also does in that certain chapter, it does kind of illustrate how if you go to like really the depths of society and you kind of the like worst part of town, it's not a good place, and there's a kind of lower class stealing mentality.
Well, I think it's less about like the like wealth of the people, but it's more like the significant difference, because Bob, the clerk, his family are quite explicitly described as like quite poor.
Yeah.
Right? And like they clearly don't have the money to help Timmy out. They're described as like knowing the inside of a pawn shop. They don't have new shoes, blah 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 blah. But what they do have, which is an important theme of this book, is like family, right? And like they have human connections and community and stuff. And this is what I think that the message is here, that this is what cultivates goodness. Whereas those people in the final chapter are dislocated, and they are they're just kind of three random people who get together while who are doing their job. And it's obviously difficult to tell if they have, we don't see them in their family environment if they have one, but we assume that I think we can assume from reading that what is things like family make people good, basically.
Yeah.
And to go back to the Marxist thing, I think it's difficult. I think it's hard to look at this book as I know you weren't saying this, but I think it's hard to look at this book through like a Marxist interpretation, really, because for a few reasons. I think firstly, as you've said, there is no real critique of wealth in this book. There is no real critique of wealth in this book. Scrooge is never. It's satisfactory for Scrooge to be charitable.
Yeah.
And it's satisfactory for him to help out in other ways. But him as a capitalist, or him, and I guess he's a capitalist. He's a business owner, right?
Yeah.
It's not really a critiqued.
No. And I would in fact make the opposite point later, but we'll get to that.
It just strikes me as very liberal, incredibly very liberal,
classically liberal. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe even pretty Christian values really as well.
Yeah, certainly. No, I was just making the point that if that was the objective, and I don't think it is.
Yeah.
But the book is not making the kind of point that wealth makes you bad and poverty makes you good.
Yeah.
Or if we go more modern Marxism, we can generalize that power makes you bad and powerlessness makes you good. Yeah. Okay, there was one thing while we're on Marx, I really wanted to pick this up. So there is one keyword that really comes through here, which is surplus population.
Right. Yeah.
I thought this was so interesting.
Yeah.
So, God, I need to.
Thomas Malthus.
When was Capital, Volume 1 written? Shit.
It was based around the same time, wasn't it?
This is kind of important. Fuck, I should have looked this up. Volume 1 of Capital. It must have been written before.
I think it was after.
No, it was after, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wait, so the term is altered. Thomas Malthus?
Yeah, 1867.
Okay.
But the original idea of overpopulation was popularized by Thomas Malthus.
Oh, okay, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he's active in the late 1700s, early 1800s.
Okay, so to put this in context for a second, so in chapter 2, I believe, we see, is it chapter 1? I think it might be chapter 1. So there's there's like a NGO kind of guy
Yes.
knocking on Scrooge's door asking for donations for doing something good for the poor on Christmas.
Yeah.
And Scrooge is like, well, do they not have, workhouses and these like state institutions where the poor can go?
Mm-hmm.
I support those. And the guy's like, well, they exist, but that doesn't mean that it's enough necessarily. And Scrooge's like, oh, humbug, and sends him away. And he mentions like, but what if they die and so on? And Scrooge is kind of like, oh well, there's kind of surplus population. There is too much of the working poor anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so then this is like a big point in Marx's Capital. I don't know about Thomas Malthus, but in Marx's Capital, he's like, basically capitalism is driving wealth inequality, and so it's therefore creating a kind of class of working poor, of surplus population that cannot be employed by the available capital. And in fact, the more and more accumulation of more and more capital to less and less people drives a bigger surplus population that is kind of, the purpose of which is to have high demand for labor to keep the cost of labor low.
Right, yeah.
And, we then see Scrooge kind of using this term, in a very, in chapter 1, he's using this term kind of how Marx would like to frame capitalists. And then in chapter 3, and I thought this was really interesting, the Ghost of Christmas Present quotes Scrooge's own words back to him. I think when Tiny Tim is about he sees Tiny Tim being really sick, and so Scrooge asks, "Oh, please tell me he will be okay." And the Ghost of Christmas Present's like, "Well, he's gonna die."
remember when you said it was okay if all the poor's died?
Yeah, you remember when when you said that the surplus population needs to be reduced, and Scrooge is like, "Oh fuck, I hate myself," and the kind of and the Ghost of Christmas Present adds on a little rant about whenever you say surplus population or these kind of things, it kind of makes you, when you make these kind of macroeconomic statements, you're really trying to be the arbiter of who gets to live and who gets to die.
Yeah.
And I thought this is so topical, and you're gonna roll your eyes now, but because later we have in the 1960s, I believe, the book The Population Bomb, which again resurfaces this term surplus population, of there's too many of us, there won't be enough food, we need to curb the growth of humanity. This is kind of early environmentalism, and of course all the predictions in The Population Bomb were 280% wrong. Turns out more population drives division of labor, which drives more production. And then nowadays, we again, I would argue, have in modern environmentalism a very, very similar rhetoric of, there's too many people, not because there's not enough food, but because, they all produce CO2. And once India and China will be attached to the whole power grid and so on, then there's going to be so many emissions, and it's going to kill the planet. So we need to reduce the population, or at least with these kind of net zero carbon emissions. Yeah, it's kind of saying, people in the third world better not dream of ever having what we have in the West, cars and all that shit. And all the people who are, and there's people today in starvation, who are really super, super dependent on fossil fuels. And I think in a very similar way of using the word surplus population in this book, or in The Population Bomb, kind of modern environmentalism has a parallel here of saying, okay, you get to live and you don't get to live.
Or at least that, again, we spoke about this the other day, different strands of environmentalism. Yeah. But I agree, I'm very skeptical of, whenever anyone talks about, overpopulation, it makes me, I don't know, very immediately quite skeptical. Because, I don't know.
Well, it never means that I am one of the too many.
Yeah.
The too many is always someone else,
and I guess there's the question in this book, and the question is like, who are the undesirables then?
Yeah.
But like, what when you say there's an overpopulation, what exactly do you mean? Like, and I don't know. It is also just like when people are like, I'm not having children because of overpopulation, and it's just like, okay, fine, whatever. Like, you do you. But anyway, so Thomas Malthus, he wrote about population, and Malthus connects to the Nazis. That's the first time
really?
I learned about Malthus. You know, like
okay.
Like Lebensraum, right?
I don't know. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, however you say it in your dirty language.
Yeah.
But it's the the idea that borders need to be expanded. This is the Nazi idea, really. Borders need to be expanded in order to accommodate more mouths, more arable land, which also I think probably motivated like the colonization of Hokkaido as well, where we are. I remember I read a paper which argued that.
Yeah, certainly.
So he wrote. There's a quote from his book, the essay on the principle of population, which he wrote in 1803. I haven't read this in advance, so it might be completely irrelevant. But Malthus made it clear whom he regarded as surplus when he wrote, "A man who is born into a world already possessed, if he cannot get subsistence from his parents, on whom he has a just demand, and if society do not want his labour, has no claim of right to the smallest portion of food, and in fact has no business to be where he is. At nature's mighty feast there is no vacant cover for him. She tells him to be gone." Which is, like, kind of fucking depressing, to be honest. Like, yeah, this kind of sums up the philosophy that Scrooge has, I think. You know, if you don't have family who can take care of you, or friends that can take care of you, and if the poor laws aren't good enough, then you may as well just die. Like, I don't know. And then, you know, obviously the message in this book is that charity is very valuable, and like charity, or like there is a lot that people can do to help other people, and if not, there's a lot of things that people should do to help other people, which is not a very disagreeable statement in my opinion.
Yeah, and to come back to this kind of ideological framing, I do think that a pretty solid interpretation would be something between conservatism and libertarianism, I think, for this book, not Marxism, even though we have all these points about, you know, the poor and the rich and so on, and this divide of wealth. The solution that Dickens proposes is kind of, well, A, the family.
Yeah.
B, kind of a spirit of charity, which is connected to, even though he doesn't explicitly make this point, you know, it is kind of the spirit of Christmas, you know, of kind of, you know, looking out for your fellow man from at least, again, he doesn't make this a really religious point in the book, but it is like, you know, Christmas obviously is Christianity, you know.
It's like a secular Christian story. kind of.
But then, you know, kind of the key point for me here as well is when the NGO guy is knocking on his door and is asking for collections for the poor, Scrooge turns him away on the basis of, but we have the public workhouses and all these institutions, the state institutions to take care of the poor, which are completely failing at taking care of the poor. Like, it's and this goes, you know, it's something that you're probably sick of by now, but that I keep quoting, like the biggest humanitarian like institution in the world is the Protestant American Church, not any welfare state in the world. Which I think that, you know, the free market and kind of the wealth that people get through capitalism and so on, you know, the free market is much more charitable and willing to take care of the working poor, and more efficient at doing so, through maybe also a kind of Christian conservative doctrine, than any welfare state machine could be. I don't think the book is making that point that far, but we do have kind of this contrast of, but we have the public institutions, why, that's enough, right?
Sure, I see what you're saying, yeah. I mean, I think you could criticize, I understand your interpretation for sure. I think that might be what Dickens was going for here.
So I'm not saying that this book is like the libertarian Bible, but I certainly don't see, despite maybe your initial thoughts, if you haven't read it, that this is like a story of rich versus poor and of Marxism versus capitalism. That's really not the case here, and that it's really not trying to frame the state as some kind of,
like benevolent,
benevolent,
even
entity.
helpful institution.
Yeah.
Because the state plays virtually no role in this book at all.
We have one allusion to the state, and it's not a positive one. So
yeah, it's surprisingly like indirect though. This book
it is,
when it comes to talking about the state, because I it's interesting how you unpack that, because I think that's a good point. The assumption is that in the reverse, like if you have these state institutions, you don't need to think about. You no longer need to think about the poor, but if these systems are failing, then you may as well not care less, or you just turn a blind eye to it, because you have this sort of symbolic structure which exists, so it doesn't matter if it actually works or not. But I mean, you probably say the same thing about charities as well. I think, like, I don't know, I've got no data on this, but like, I don't think there's, I can see, obviously, I know how you can have big problems of corruption in the state when it comes to things like, certain programs like that, for example.
Right.
Or even just like inefficiencies. Actually, I think is probably the biggest problem.
Yeah.
But I also don't think that, necessarily like.
Yeah, NGOs aren't perfect, and every now and then there's a story about like, oh, the money didn't go where it was supposed to go, and shit like that.
Yeah. And that happens a lot, really.
Yeah.
But yeah. Interesting. Should we have a break?
We could have a break. We could introduce the break by having a little Christmas gift exchange.
Yeah, I think we should.
This is a story about giving. And so we've both, without previous arrangement.
We actually both got each other a Christmas present without actually talking about it, which is quite cute.
So, wait, let me grab.
I have mine in my pocket. It's gonna be nice and warm for you now. Oh, that looks big. Mine's embarrassingly small.
I know it is. Nick, I know yours is embarrassingly small. You don't.
Alright, here's your Christmas present.
It's a coffee
chewing gum.
Coffee chewing gum. That's. I already know I'm gonna put this in my mouth, and immediately. This is the inverse Christmas Carol. I'm gonna become Scrooge from chapter 1.
So Phil loves coffee, for anyone that doesn't know.
Yeah,
he's a coffee bitch.
I got you.
Oh, what?
I got you
this is glühwein.
A German glühwein.
Oh, sick! Thank you.
From the import store.
Oh, no way.
Yeah,
you went way overkill.
You can take it home.
Thank you.
It comes with a bag.
I like bags. Yeah. Oh, that's sick. Thank you.
You can also drink it now if you'd like. But we've already been getting started on some beers. So.
We have, yeah, that's true. Oh, that's sick. Thank you. And it's made of cherries too. Alright. So we'll have a little break and we will come back and discuss some more. I have a drink. I have another beer. Phil has some tasty snacks, which he's probably going to crunch too loudly.
Well, now I can't.
You can crunch them.
I can
you can
crunch
them. That's fine.
Um,
You'll be forgiven.
we exchanged gifts,
Yes.
and we're back with the jolly spirit of Christmas.
Yeah, it's flowing through our veins.
I don't know when this goes up, but just for reference, it is the 21st of December when we're recording this.
Yeah.
So, if any one of us have been naughty book boys, it is not unlikely that in a couple next nights, we'll see someone visiting us.
Yeah, and like for the past maybe month or two now, Phil has been telling me about this door, the door in his apartment, which kind of like rattles. We had to stick. So we're at Phil's place for this podcast. We had to stick a piece of kitchen paper in the door and jam it in the door because it keeps rattling, and it rattles at like the weirdest times, and it's like kind of creepy.
Yeah, kind of violent as well. So I think there's definitely.
It's like someone's like probably shaking the door like.
There's some solid Christmas ghostery going on.
Something's happening.
And yeah, it did appear a couple of weeks, probably in December. So
yeah,
maybe the ghost of Christmas something is trying to tell me something.
You're gonna get visited by some guy.
Okay, we have a couple of other things to mention. One thing, just really quick comment. I don't know how you felt about the ending, but I thought the payoff was really worth it. Like, when Scrooge kind of was reformed and he was like jolly, going around giving everyone money and being like nice. It is like really genuinely fun to experience that ending, and yeah, it makes you want to do something for the people you care about as well. So it is, I don't know, it is a quite effective story, I would say.
Yeah, you can definitely feel the the tone in the end of this book is like basically any other Christmas movie you might see, where someone is overcome with the joy of giving to others.
Yeah.
Whether it's monetarily or like through other means, or just by being a nice presence, I guess.
Yeah, we always hear giving is better than receiving, and obviously no one fucking believes that. But this may be the only kind of story where it feels genuine,
Yeah. But of course that we have the, one thing that kind of stares us in the face, I think, when we read this final chapter is like there is this great payoff, which suggests that he's had this really, really substantial experience which has really changed him. But how applicable is this story to real life? How applicable is how how can people change really and substantially through their experiences? Obviously we can't guarantee that anyone is going to have the experience that he had, but the moral here seems to be that anyone can change, and that anyone can be a positive force in the lives of others, and it can happen immediately, and it is essentially up to you whether you do that. Even though here there is some spiritual intervention that kicks it off, in the end it's him that decides, I'm going to be a good person now.
Yeah, well, the spirits show him, they just show him objective reality, right? They don't really comment on it too much.
Yeah, and they're always saying this is what happened. This is all you're seeing is something that happened. You're not seeing anything good or bad. You're just seeing what happened.
Yeah.
Or you're seeing what will happen or what is happening now. Obviously, they decide what they show him, but
the truth will set you free.
Yeah.
One thing, you mentioned how
I thought it was work will set you free.
No, that's the German Christmas. So you mentioned how applicable is this really, and I guess one critique would be that, okay, so there's the whole aspect of reformation, and he kind of flips very quickly and so on. Okay, But apart from that, also, there's a very naive attitude to the benefits of giving, which for the sake of the story is great. And I think overall it does hold true. Like, people who are generous will be more happy, and are regarded as better people in the community. But it doesn't mean that this always works. I know some people who are really generous, and also, thinking about myself in the past, like, of instances when I was really generous with people, and like, chances are people will really take advantage of you and fuck you over.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like, if you are nice to people, they'll be nice back, and if you believe that, it'll be fine. No, that's just not how it works.
Yeah, but I think what's what is being addressed here is clearly like a. It's not just. I don't think it's just applicable to any random person necessarily. I think it's more people who have wealth, people who have power of some kind, and are like presented with people who are in those two children like want. Is it want and ignorance?
Want and ignorance.
Actually, that might not be the parallel to make, but like
people
who are needy or who would benefit from help. It's more. I think it's more like more prompting people to recognize when they're in positions where they can help someone who is genuinely in need, rather than just being an open store for anyone to take what they want from you.
Yeah, right? Fair enough.
And because again, like, this book doesn't criticize the power that Scrooge has with his business, for example. Like, it very much like leaves that in its place and respects that. And says, you can have this property which makes you a lot of money. You just have to give a little bit of it away.
Yeah.
You have to help people a little bit, and how much you give is probably determined by a couple of different factors, I think.
Because in the end, it's not like critiquing having wealth. It is wealth that helps to save Tiny Tim and whatever and so
exactly.
on. And
Tiny Tim.
It's not all. And also, going back to the earlier point, it's not that this has to be achieved under state compulsion, but it is kind of an inward transformation.
Yeah, but it's also prompted by something external. Which
but it's more so spiritually than anything else, maybe.
I think one of the things I really liked about the way it described this transformation was it was kind of like described as a sort of plop, I guess, is the best way of putting it. His change happens very quickly, I think, but like when, for example, he you were trying to do that quietly.
Don't mind me opening this can.
Why are you trying to how can you open a can quietly?
Go on.
So when he's visited by the ghost of Christmas Present, and he goes and he sees all the families who are celebrating Christmas and stuff. There's a point where he's like acting as if he's there, and he's like really getting involved in the games that they're playing. The 20 questions game, which for those still listening is the fucking game where you basically have something in your mind, and like the other people try and guess what it is, and you have to guess it through yes or no questions. But so he's watching these people play these games, and he's getting super into it, even though he can't be seen by anyone there. And I think what that demonstrates is how a lot of these barriers that people build up when it comes to other people, for example, are very easily broken psychological barriers. And like when you're given the opportunity to see past that barrier and like see that it's just completely contrived and like there's actually nothing there to worry about, then you can like act on it. So like whilst before, I think maybe part of his behavior, like resisting seeing other people on Christmas Eve, for example, partly out of like a self-imposed like idea that he doesn't need this, or like that he's above that or whatever. But in reality, like he really would like that. He just doesn't realize it, or he's like has this kind of weird thing that's blocking him from doing so, right?
Yeah, it very much feels like when you think back to being an awkward middle schooler, and you're looking at my Red Bull can. Have a sip. It's actually not bad.
Oh, that's tasty. Yeah.
When you think of, you're kind of you're kind of an outcast and don't have a lot of friends, so the big popular group people, they have a party, and you're like, well, I don't even want to be at this party.
Mm.
And then they invite you to the party, and you're like, no, fuck you. It's it's kind of a spiteful, like,
yes, but
you really do want that, but you've been denied it for so long that you feel like, if you deny them, then you have some kind of power.
Yeah. And yeah, it's like by not identifying with it, you like create this new identity of yourself, like this thing that, and by being happy about it, you also admit that you've been without it for so long, something that you actually care about.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely a part of it.
Because if you go to the birthday party, or if Scrooge would visit his nephew, he's kind of admitting that he was a loser outcast for all these years who was missing out.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't go, then he can still remain a kind of sense of moral superiority in his own little universe.
Yeah. He can save face. He doesn't have to. Yeah, and it doesn't have to deal with the shame of turning up and then being like, oh God, you're finally here. But then, in the final chapter where he meets one of his business partners in the street, I think, he goes up and shakes his hand and is really enthusiastic to walk towards him. And the guy's like, this is Scrooge? Like, this is you? And that's the kind of same thing you would deal with, right? It's like, this is you now? But he doesn't feel any shame about it now, right? He doesn't feel, but in the past he would have felt shame about being a happy person, right?
Yeah, and when he goes to his nephew's house, he's generally well received by everyone.
Yeah.
Even though they were kind of chatting shit about him earlier.
Yeah.
But it is like a jolly time. When you're a middle schooler and you do go to the popular kid's birthday party, you will absolutely have the worst time of your life. Oh my God, he actually showed up.
What a fucking loser.
Yeah. Okay. One aspect about the ending as well is that Scrooge was supposed to die on Christmas Day. I believe. Or maybe the day after. But the future where you see him dying,
right? Yeah.
It is the next day, pretty much.
Yeah.
And also Tiny Tim as well.
Yeah.
And so
Tiny Tim.
Yeah, and so it's not like, we were talking about how Tiny Tim was saved by the money or the care or medicine or whatever. It's not actually the case.
No.
So in the future, we see basically the next day, Scrooge and Tiny Tim dying. And, by virtue of Scrooge's transformation, and he does donate some money to the family and so on, but, it's not like they got him a surgery overnight and that's what saved the boy.
Yeah.
And same with Scrooge. We don't know his cause of death, but by virtue of him transforming, he does not die.
I didn't pick up on the fact that it was the next day.
It is the next. I was while reading. I was wondering is it the next fucking day? But then at the end, it is confirmed by the narrator being and it's the next day and so on. And Tiny Tim was alive, not dead.
Yeah.
So it is very much in it. So, this is the idea that it's not merely the material means.
Yeah, of course.
Which again we could bring back to a Marxist point. It is not that the material means of wealth or of subsistence is what saved these people. It is, it is a spiritual transformation. The idea that charity, that giving in itself, is salvation, in a literal meaning of being alive, being kept from dying.
Yeah, and even before charity, actually, just the willing to participate with others.
Yeah.
they're willing to be like open and being open to being close with others, and like the willingness to participate in family and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Clearly.
So we do have like the material kind of level where giving money to the poor and donating and so on keeps people from dying, but we also have the more spiritual level, like
and
virtue by itself,
so
is keeping people alive.
And I think as well that this is mentioned earlier in the book as well, when we have he's visited by the ghost of Christmas past, and he goes to see when he was a young man as an apprentice, and his old boss, who was fairly wealthy, Fezziwig, who was fairly wealthy, would that he relives this memory of having a Christmas Eve party, and there was like quite a explicit description. I think the spirit is playing devil's advocate and like criticizing Fezziwig. He's like, he's saying like he what has he really done? I think like he only whipped up this party together with like £4 or something, like a really small amount of money. But then the whole point is that like
Scrooge defends him.
So the spirit encourages Scrooge to defend Fezziwig, which is of course like going against his own interest.
Scrooge is like, it's not about the money that he spent, it's about
his ability to
bring people together and create the jolly Christmas spirit and
exactly, it's his ability to create joy. I think he describes it as. And that I thought that was quite interesting. Like you can have like, you don't, beyond having money and beyond having like material things to offer to other people, you can also make do by just being a positive force by one way or another. And I thought it was a very good point, and like, and it it adds more texture to this story. That it's not just about having wealth and giving it to others. I think that's one of the things that makes this story more applicable to everyone rather than just people that have money and power, right?
Yeah, because really,
this is kind of like a call for action, bit of moral suasion for people who have money.
Yeah,
and I think it's heavily like embedded in this like Christian ideology. But beyond that, just like on a simple level, just being useful to others in other ways is like a really positive thing.
And it's also embodied by the nephew, who is so like helpful toward everyone and forthcoming, even though he's not wealthy.
Yeah. Exactly. I really like as well and like making food for each other and stuff like that. Like and even though people don't have like the biggest turkeys or the biggest goose or whatever, they still put a huge amount of effort into the stuff that they're doing, and there's all that feedback when the people are at their dinner table and like they're having these meals and they're like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah, because when Scrooge shows up at his nephew's house in the end, he doesn't actually like bring expensive gifts or anything. He just shows up, and that's enough.
Yeah. What the fuck? I've written notes, but I can't even read this. Oh, right, okay. Something that I thought I don't really know why it needed to be in the book, and I think it would be good to talk about. There's quite a lot of like points where Scrooge is like being dunked on by people in the book whilst he's like observing them. So like when he's in the present, he's like seeing his cousin and stuff, his family, his nephew, and seeing Bob the clerk and their family, very like, what's the word, like, reluctantly wishing him a Merry Christmas, and also talking about how much of a pain he is, and in the future as well, even admitting that they're kind of like happy that he died, or not admitting, but like revealing that they are relieved that he's died.
Yeah, but that was directly. That wasn't Bob though. Who was that?
No, that was Fred, his nephew.
Oh, okay. Because that one is about like his wife.
Yeah.
For just a brief second is like. So the scene is in the future. His nephew is heavily indebted to Scrooge, and there's some kind of dispute about the money that he owes him.
Yeah.
And so, by virtue of Scrooge dying, basically the household can survive.
Mm-hmm.
And for a second, his wife is like, "Thank God," and then she immediately regrets it and apologizes, like that she would be happy about someone's death. But I think it's kind of framed in a pretty
that's a
way,
fair point. That's a fair point.
because they're not like being.
I forgot about that. Actually,
they're not like rejoicing about his death. They're actually kind of feel bad about him dying, but they're also ambivalent about it because him dying allowed them to survive.
But I think it would make a difference if Scrooge was helping them out with a real altruistic mindset rather than like what he was probably doing, which was like never letting them hear the end of how he's given them money, So I think like if he had, whilst the wife might think the same thing, if he had given the money in a more positive way and been a more positive presence in their life, I don't think she would have thought about it in the same way. Like, because of how we see like the way that he's talked about earlier in the book as well. Like he's all, they don't like him, right?
No.
And they talk about how they don't like him either. And say that this was reformed Scrooge who gave them money. I think they would probably be pretty, I'm assuming this, but like, I think if reformed Scrooge gave them money, he would either not ask for it back, or he would be very, very, accommodating with the terms of the loan.
Yeah.
And I don't think that reformed Scrooge would give them a loan that would put them on under such pressure that they would feel extreme, like they would feel relief that they couldn't suppress.
Yeah.
After knowing that he died, right? What I wanted to talk about was like the effect of seeing that on Scrooge, because for me, like if I saw people like making fun of the way that I behaved, or like if I witnessed that, it wouldn't necessarily make me want to change my behavior.
Right.
Like
it would fuck you.
In a way, or not even to that extent. It would make me sad. But it would I would lose trust in people, I think, like observing that, I think. And like, although it obviously happens, but like the idea that was an experience for him in the middle of the book where he observes that and he feels bad, and that is like an impetus for him to change his behavior, feels a little bit
I don't think them talking bad about him is an impetus for him to change his behavior. I think more the point was he asked the spirit to show him someone who would be like emotionally impacted by his death, because in the corners no one cared about Scrooge dying.
Yeah.
So he was like, doesn't someone care? Doesn't someone feel something about my death? And then he shows him that scene where they're like, oh, this is like the only emotional effect your death has on anyone is on this family who is now relieved that they don't have to pay back the loan, right?
Yeah. But I was talking about like the middle of the book where they're having their Christmas dinner. And they talk about and they reluctantly, like say cheers to Scrooge. There's like, it reminded me a bit of the trial, not the trial, the metamorphosis, where like Gregor Samsa's function in the family is revealed when he can no longer like provide to the family.
Yeah.
And like, even in a very intimate family setting, people can still like, be very honestly talk badly about the people within the family in a way that's beyond just like, ribbing like your family member or recognizing their faults. But like, it's like, in a way, it felt in a way like this is destructive to the family. Is this kind of like behavior the family of participating is destructive to this idea of family in itself.
Yeah, but Scrooge never tried to be part of the family, you know?
Yeah.
And I think the contrast there is more that his nieces or whatever, like the people who don't really know him, he like never really talked to him. They only know like all the bad rumors about him. They kind of shit talking him, and the nephew is being like, yeah, he's kind of a cuck, but you know, I still will invite him every Christmas to maybe one day, you know, maybe one day we'll get him on our side. So I think that the point they're trying to make there is more on the benevolence of the nephew more so than on them shit talking him.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like they needed someone to talk bad about him so that we can have the contrast of the nephew kind of being like reformative in a sense.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That doesn't make sense.
Okay, I wanted to talk about one aspect. You're gonna be so mad. The most unrealistic part about the book.
Okay.
The biggest logical flaw, the biggest error in this book, is when we see his past with there was this woman that Scrooge was engaged to or whatever, had a romance with, but he over time he grows more and more like stingy and concerned about his wealth.
He goes on his grind set. That's the problem.
He goes on his grind set. He does the entertain thing. No, but
he stops reading books.
So basically Scrooge becomes more and more wealthy and like high status and obsessed with wealth, and so the woman is like, oh, you don't love me anymore.
Oh, I fucking know
it. This has never happened in the history of humanity. No woman has ever left the guy. No woman has ever left the guy because he makes too much money. This is the biggest logical flaw in the whole book. Yep.
You just have shit taste in women.
Nope.
Yeah.
True.
Shit taste in women.
True.
That's literally it. Shit taste in women.
Literally true.
No.
Literally true.
Completely reject that. I've been my girlfriend for 5 years, and I have fucking no money. And
but she wouldn't leave you if you suddenly made more.
No. But that's not what happens, right? Like she leaves him because his priorities change from like love to money, right?
Yeah.
That's what starts happening. So like it's more like, man, if I got on my fucking Andrew Tate grind set, I think that would probably become a problem in my relationship, to be honest. Like
okay, you know, I'm sure there are rare exceptions, but on the whole,
no, not even then.
No, absolutely, 100%.
Nah, you need some blue pill, man.
100%. The biggest reason for divorce in the United States is when the woman makes more money than the man.
Okay. What does that say though? Like, if you have more financial freedom, like, you're less likely to stick with someone you don't like.
No, you look for someone who makes more than you if you're a woman. Because women marry across and up the status hierarchy.
But that's still divorce rate though, right? That's not a marriage rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever.
I was making a comical point. I mean,
it's fun.
I'm also like serious.
I like this debate. So another thing is
all I'm saying is if Scrooge was a little bit less concerned about her, but instead bought her some Gucci bags, I'm sure she'd be fine with that. I'm sure she would have no problem.
I think yeah, probably. I think, but also like, I don't know, like if
he was just too stingy, you know. He wasn't sharing the wealth with her.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But then there was also no like requirement for him to do that. But I don't know. I still think it's.
No, we can move on.
No. It's kind of. I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember my point anyway. Never mind. So there's another thing that I'm kind of like slightly skeptical, I guess, about the messaging of this book, or like something that I don't know. If it doesn't feel like it's particularly relevant now, or like it's definitely not like something I think is widely appreciated or not widely understood if possible now, is the idea of like putting aside grievances for the sake of like Christmas, like the Christmas spirit.
Yeah.
Like putting aside disagreements and quarrels and stuff like that. You know, the disagreements in this book are not particularly like severe, and like the kind of like problems that they're kind of interfamilial conflict and stuff is not really like drawn up, like talked about that strong, like that deeply, but it also doesn't seem like much of a problem anyway. Like when he finally visits his family, it's basically like just like normal and it's fine, and like no one really hates each other, but you know, like so many people like talking about like going home for the holidays and shit, all they talk about is how they just can't fucking tolerate their family. Which I find is really fucking depressing, man. Like
we have a mutual friend though who's different, I guess.
Do we?
Who's always talking about wanting to be with their family, especially around Christmas.
First letter of their name is K?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I don't think it's old people at all, but like, I know that's like that is like quite a present problem for like a lot of people. Like, finding it, and I am like quite skeptical of that idea anyway. I think it's really important to like, to not to put aside disagreement, but to appreciate what's maybe the most important.
Ceasefire, right?
Ceasefire, or like, just like finding appropriate ways to talk about it, or like appropriate times to talk about things, and finding, you know, just remembering, like, I don't know, I think family's cool. Like, I like family. I think it's, you know, it's something we can't really get anywhere else. And if you can have a good relationship with your family, I think it's always a good thing.
True, and this is kind of this always almost goes on like an unrelated tangent, but to criticize that point of having a ceasefire and, you know, knowing when it is appropriate and so on, that will always benefit the side, I wouldn't say the side that's winning, but okay, say if there is a disagreement about something, I don't know, someone did something within the family that one person sees as unforgivable. How could you do this? I can't stand being near you anymore, so on. I don't know, we should oust you from the family, what you have done is so terrible, and so on.
Yeah.
If you then have a ceasefire, that's kind of just giving a win to the opposite side.
Exactly,
you know?
yeah. It's always going to benefit the party that has the kind of strongest familial consensus, like whether it's right or wrong, or even just the person who is like being challenged. Right?
Yeah, because by virtue of, if one side is arguing this is so big of a deal that we can't associate with you anymore, and the other side is arguing that it's not that big a deal, by having a ceasefire and all coming together, you're kind of admitting that it's not that big a deal.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. And I think like I think maybe the main idea is that you should still come together, right?
Right.
And like, I think if I were to be charitable, and I'm not like super skeptical about this, I guess, but like if I was going to be charitable, I would say like, you know, these things are part of the process of making things better with other people. But often, and maybe this is just a fault of reading this book after seeing, you know, countless Christmas movies that you know, put out a very kind of trite message, is that anything can just be resolved by like, you know, hugging your family and saying that you love them and whatever.
Right.
Which is obviously just like, I don't know, a recipe to awfully internalize things that you would otherwise freely say to someone that you didn't feel so close to. And yeah, I think generally the best way of going forward is trying to do both, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
You wanted to talk about salvation, didn't you? You made me write that down.
I kind of mentioned it, like the idea of, virtue itself being salvation, not the material.
Oh, okay.
Because Scrooge lives.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, one point, and we kind of talked about this a little bit in the first half, but how easily Scrooge is reformed, and talking about like realistic application, can you really...
How do we apply this book?
Like if people who are extremely set in their ways and have been kind of living according to a certain doctrine for ages, and then in old fucking age, all of a sudden they get the epiphany and they completely reform. I mean, that's just not super realistic, is it?
No, it never really happens. And that's like the thing, we have the spiritual intervention, which is like, in my mind, that throws out like the whole idea that you can do this by your own free will.
I don't know.
I think it does. Like, maybe not entirely, but like, this guy isn't really like, I don't know. He's acting in what he perceives as his best interest all the time. He's like, he doesn't see these things that he realizes that he wants, like the family. He doesn't think about his past because he's trying to. He thinks that it's like described as like a dream that he tries to forget or something.
Yeah.
And obviously he's not thinking about his future. But he's living like a life that he may as well. He'd probably say that was fine for him. Or at the very least, if someone really tried to press him, he would just probably bat them away. I don't know. It took like a supernatural experience where he was allowed to do things that, and like perceive things that he wouldn't ordinarily be able to, like seeing his past as it was, looking through walls and like seeing things that are happening behind doors that he was not willing to go through.
Yeah. And
then obviously seeing the consequences of his whole life and like the legacy of his whole life that we never get to see. That's what spurred him to act. Like, he obviously had the decision to act at that point, but like without that he wouldn't have done anything.
I guess the counterpoint to that is that in a way, yes, an external intervention isn't really realistic, and certainly wouldn't have worked if any of his like actual people in the book talked to him. I guess you could say that the things that he sees in the past, he knows, because it's his own past. The things that he sees in the future and kind of in the present behind walls, the whole Tiny Tim thing, the sick boy, Tiny Tim is kind of an exception. But generally, all these things, like the fact that he will die alone, the fact that no one will care when he dies, the fact that his other business partners don't see him as a friend, but just as like this old dude who's kind of annoying.
Yeah.
These are all obvious things that he knows. That, like, he is, like, we have this whole thing and, like, he's, like, surprised, like, what? No one came to my funeral? Like, I can't believe it. Yeah. But obviously he fucking knows this. Like, he knows he has no friends. He knows no one cares about him. This is not shocking. He only has to actually acknowledge it. So I would say this spiritual intervention of the spirits, again, just showing him reality, showing him obvious things, it is kind of a metaphor how this is an internal transformation and not an external transformation. That he, even though he sees through walls and he sees the future and so on, he doesn't actually learn, like, a big epiphany that he couldn't have figured out just by sitting down for 10 minutes and thinking about it,
Yeah, but then like the question is, why would he want to do that? Like, why would he want to confront his difficult past and the mistakes that he made along the way. Why would he, also why would he want to confront these things which he'd been denying for so long, like the idea of like charity at Christmas being a good thing, or the idea that people can be nice to him when he was a kid, or that you can have a boss that's like a positive influence in the community and stuff.
Okay, this brings us a bit deeper. So now we have so based on the assumption that the spirits intervening is an internal reflection, not an external one, and based on that idea, we now ask, well, why would you even do that in the first place? What's the benefit of that? And I guess the trigger is, the way that the book starts out, by his dead colleague, right? He thinks about, like, really kind of the only friend-ish he had. So I guess, yeah, if we try to make like a bigger moral about this world in the real world without spirits and so on, and without like if we truly make this like a autonomous self-reflection story, it is that if you lose, even though you may think of them as a business partner or someone, if you lose someone close to you, then that can ignite self-reflection. Because that is the trigger, right? In the book, obviously, the spirit comes back and tries to warn him, like, you will have a terrible afterlife where you will go around as a ghost, regretting your whole life. So I am here to save you.
Be covered in chains.
Yeah, I am here to save you. But, if we take this as a metaphor, what does this mean? Well, it means something to the extent of that, self-reflection after the death of someone you cared about, even though this is kind of ambiguous, how much did he really care about his friend? It does seem like he kind of cared, right? This triggers self-reformation in a way.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I agree that, like, it's kind of like a nascent like guilty conscience of his. Like, he's got this, like, I don't know, the that's what becomes these chains, which will eventually like weigh you down in the afterlife.
Yeah,
these things that you're kind of guilty of doing, or like this life that you could have been spending better. What was my fucking point? Oh God! Why the preamble? Fuck! I forgot what I was gonna say. Never mind. What did you just say?
I mentioned that the death of someone you cared about can trigger self-reflection. Okay.
Yes. So it's kind of like, when we have like big moments like this in our lives, like when you think about like an ex-girlfriend or something, or when you think about like someone that that like passed away or something, and you find moments, there are moments where that kind of comes back to you stronger and cause you to like question what you're currently doing and the way that you're currently living your life.
Right.
And these things can be a cause for change. But I still think that like the way that the spirits intervened, which was incredibly like active, like they pulled him out of bed, pulled him out of his room, threw him across the world to all these different places. They might have shown him, quote unquote, the reality of his past and the reality of things that were happening, but they engineered what he saw. Yeah. And even in the future, the ghost of the future didn't even say anything. He just fucking pointed at shit and was like, "Look at this! Look at this! Look at this!" Like some, I don't know, fucking child that can't speak yet.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
it's like, where does that come from? I don't know.
Scrooge couldn't have done it by himself. I guess the impetus for the reader is that, confront your past, confront your present, confront your future. Do the work that Scrooge couldn't do by himself. Yeah,
but I still think that's, it's not. It won't target everyone, right?
No.
And I guess that's not the point. But like, this isn't for Scrooge. This isn't for the Scrooges of the world, because the Scrooges of the world wouldn't read a book called Christmas Carol, right? So I mean, it's not a critical issue of the book, I guess, but it's just sort of like,
I would also say that in the real world, as far as I've learned it, at least from personal experience, I guess, you'd be pretty hard pressed to find Scrooge. Like, people who are wealthy are genuinely like quite generous people, as far as I can tell. Like, and you can argue that it's only for show and it's only to like alleviate the guilt of having money and whatever, but it's kind of like, if once people get wealthy, they also become like way more generous,
But then, I mean, generous with money,
yeah,
right? But that's the product of just having more money, right? Like, if you do not have money, you shouldn't be giving money away if you need it, right? Necessarily, like, I don't think that's, but it, like you say, I don't know. I am kind of critical of like the fact that you might be like an actor or something, and your manager's like, right, we've got these 5 charities which we're gonna allocate some of your money to, and you're just like, oh yeah, okay,
right.
Or like you fucking I don't know, you start some like charity or something, which has your face on it, which is good, and like whatever. I don't know. I'm kind of skeptical of that, to be honest.
What is Bill Gates really trying to do with those vaccines?
There was an example I was thinking of the other day, but I don't know. I kind of hate that. I mean, it's not. I'm sure it's not a bad thing. And the idea of people with money doing things with that wealth is obviously a good thing. And I don't care if it's a product of social pressure or general, like, we want people who are in positions of power to be giving money away.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't call a celebrity necessarily a good person for doing that. In fact, I wouldn't at all, actually, at all. Like, I think it's, it's like fucking, this like super fucking Reddit thing, like Keanu Reeves. Like, everyone's like, Keanu Reeves, oh, he's so amazing. Like,
yeah.
People sewing out for Keanu Reeves. It's like, it's just this annoying, like, buying into celebrity. And, when people are like charitable and stuff, it's just another reason for people to buy into this celebrity image, which is not actually
fair enough. Yeah, I think
sensitive.
I think celebrities are. Yeah, you make a very fair point. I wasn't thinking of celebrities per se. I was more thinking of like the invisible top managers.
Yeah, that's fair. Sure.
Or just even like your small town family that is better off. They're also usually involved in the community.
Well, in that case, like the social pressure of that those like managers, handlers, like organizing these things, or like that same pressure probably wouldn't exist.
Yeah, and to quickly go back to the idea of the kind of institutionalism versus individualism when it comes to charity, and also what you mentioned with kind of the tone deaf celebrity stuff.
Yeah,
this reminds me, and I forgot who it was. This so vividly reminds me of, I believe it's on John Oliver, one of those night shows.
Yeah.
Late night TV, and they have all these super rich like celebrities on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot who exactly it was. Not that it matters, but it's some like, you have like a bunch of rich people in a room, who are also in the public eye. You have your late night host, and you have all these like celebrity guests who are just like sitting on like so much money they don't know what the fuck to do with it.
Yeah, right.
And they're talking about like, oh man, look at Venezuela, it's going so good, and the not like like celebrating socialism, and I wish America could be more like this, and it's dude, it's
or I guess like AOC's Eat the Rich thing, which is pretty bad.
But it is kind of this like yeah, if you just pay your, what is it, the Ablasshandel, the church thing. If you pay your indulgences, then
Sure.
you know, you only need to demonstrate to the public that you're concerned about this.
Yeah.
You don't have to do any of the actual work or research or anything as an individual.
Yeah, no, totally.
Just contribute to the institutionalization of charity, and then it's all good, you know.
But then I don't know. I wouldn't say they're contributing to the institutionalization.
Yeah,
of charity.
not even that, right?
They're more just like, it's just they're trying to signal that they're like, you know, it's really just pandering to, like, trying to pander to people, and I think it's just like, it's funny because it's just completely not in their interest, and they probably know it as well. I also think that's really fucking stupid, but that's it. Like, anyone that's like in the public eye like that, I basically just completely disregard.
Yeah, no, but it's.
It makes it funny though.
It is funny, but it's also sad. Like, there was I think John Oliver did like a whole episode of defending Venezuela.
Right.
Like, look, it's so good, and they're lining up for food stamps, and like it's all, and they have healthcare, and like, oh, dude, it's so tone deaf. I don't know. Okay.
I mean, John Oliver's different. Like, he's at least it's slightly different, I guess. Like, he's at least explicitly a political figure, whereas celebrities are basically not, right?
Yeah, at least pre 2016.
What do you mean?
Like, after Trump,
John Oliver, celebrities.
No, like after 2016, every celebrity now has a public. There's some exceptions. I think Cillian Murphy is like constantly denying like that. Henry Cavill, I can't. But you know, like every pop star, every actor I can think of, otherwise has like basically endorsed their political candidate in the
I don't think that makes them political figures. That's basically what I'm saying.
Maybe not.
They surely have political influence, but my point is that's, I don't know. I think of that as something that celebrities just do. Like, it's in their interest to do so. Like, yeah, it's in their interest to.
But it wasn't for the longest time.
Yeah, but I mean, it also, like, we also haven't had the same levels of like political participation and
fair enough
awareness of politics, and I think people know that. Yeah, I don't know. It's a question why. The question for me is why it's. Taking for granted the idea that celebrities only do it for public image. I still do find it interesting that they do it, even knowing that they're alienating a group of conservatives and whatever. I mean, the other way around as well.
I wouldn't even say necessarily that they're just doing it for public image. I think a lot of people are actually quite involved in it, but they're so excited to share their personal political opinions. I don't know.
Maybe.
Like,
but I think that's still mixed up in like a lot of the celebrity thing, right?
Perhaps it's
still motivated by what is, like, most beneficial for them in some ways, right?
Yeah, it just always puts to the test the idea of being able to separate the art from the artist. Because it's like, especially in Japan, because no one in Japan, like, everyone loves Western celebrities, but no one is aware of any of the like Late Show drama and all that shit. Right. So it's like you talk to some girl and she's like, oh, I love Tom Cruise, and all I can think of is like, he's in Scientology. Yeah. And then the next one I was like, I love Ariana Grande, and I'm like, she campaigned for Bernie Sanders. She campaigned for Bernie.
She also has a fucking barbecue tattoo on her finger.
All right, we've drifted off a bit. Write a nice letter. Call someone that you had a quarrel with, and buy someone a gift who doesn't expect it. That's our message.
Yeah, and maybe like be weirdly nice to someone on the street for no reason. Not like weirdly nice. Be uncharacteristically nice to someone.
Yeah, just be really touchy.
Be really freaky with them.
Touch people.
dox someone that you really love.
And with that,
Yeah, I think we'll call it a day with that now.
we'll send you off to the holiday. Is this the last Book Boys in 2022?
I think it is, yeah.
Holy shit.
Because there's only 9 days left in... Or, wait, 12 days? Actually, wait, maybe we do have one.
Because we've been late for a while, so we probably have some piling up. And we have a bit more time now.
Yeah.
I
I
don't
think we were thinking of doing it on the 30th. But
Alright, well, it's the last one before Christmas, so
it's definitely last before Christmas.
have a very Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Have a good Christmas, everyone.
And even if you're not excited about Christianity, you can still enjoy the spirit of giving.
And Hanukkah.
And Hanukkah. I think it's over.
Yeah, it is. The memory, the ghost of Hanukkah.
The ghost of
past.
Hanukkah. The ghost of Hanukkah future shows you which company to invest in.
Shut up! Goodbye.
Who dies? Who do I put a life insurance on?
Boys.